If you're reading this, you did not find it by accident. This report was not misplaced. It was not leaked in a panic. It was seeded quietly, because the people who still have functioning consciences inside that range understand one thing. Containment is not the same as control. My name is redacted in the header copy you'll never see. In the field, I was Mason, Special Operations attached to a compartmented recovery unit. I'm writing this in plain English because codes only protect the people who wrote them, and you are not one of those people. You asked for what they found buried under Area 51. It was not a demon. It was not a ghost. It did not speak Latin. It did not float. It was worse than supernatural because it was plausible. It was engineered. And it learned. Classified report / transcription copy. Clearance, Orion/Sigma 9. Operation, Silt Vault. Location, Nevada Test and Training Range, Groom Lake Complex. Date, time redacted. Reporting individual, Mason call sign. Distribution, limited/eyes only. Status, unauthorized copy, do not forward. I'm going to give you the truth in the order it happened. Because the order matters, the dread did not arrive all at once. It grew, like pressure, like a crack creeping through concrete. And through us. 1. Arrival. We entered the range at night. No dawn glow, no moon. The desert looked like a dead ocean under starlight. Inside the vehicle, everything was green through night optics. The air smelled of dust and hot polymer. My glove squeaked slightly on the rifle grip every time I flexed. The closer we got to the inner perimeter, the more the place felt restrained, like a facility holding its breath. The guard towers were lit but dimmed. Vehicle checkpoints were staffed but silent. Men with weapons did not make eye contact. Their faces had that familiar expression I've seen right before bad things, when someone has decided not to think about what they're guarding. Our convoy stopped at a hangar that didn't look like a hangar anymore. The door was sealed with fresh weld lines. A new stenciled label had been sprayed across the concrete wall. G9 Geological Access. I'd been on this range before, on other work. I had never heard of G9. Captain Rourke, our liaison, stepped down from the passenger seat. He wore civilian coveralls over body armor, which is a uniform designed to tell lies. He handed each of us a small laminated card. On it, a single instruction: do not describe the sound. I looked at him, waiting for a joke that never came. He said quiet and flat, if you describe it, you anchor it. No one asked what that meant. We all pretended we understood. 2. Descent. The access point was an industrial lift shaft, not a stairwell. A steel cage lowered us into the ground like cargo. The chain drive groaned. Every few seconds a cage shuddered, and vibration traveled up through my boots into my knees. Levels went by on a digital display. B1, B2, B3, then B5, then B7. After B7, the display went blank. It wasn't broken. It had been disabled. A minute later, the temperature dropped sharply. The air turned damp. Not humid like a greenhouse, damp like stone. My nostrils filled with the smell of mineral wetness and faint burnt electricity. Ozone. Dr. Harlan, one of the attached technical element, tightened his respirator and glanced at me through the clear faceplate. His eyes were bloodshot and too awake. He whispered, don't take deep breaths. The lift stopped. The gate slid open. We stepped into a corridor built from poured concrete and reinforced steel, but the surface looked wrong. Hairline fractures like spiderwebs sealed and resealed. Patches of newer material overlapped older pores, like repeated attempts to plug a leak. A security camera stared at us from the ceiling, lens glass crazed with fine cracks. And then we felt it. Not loud, not a voice, a low-frequency modulation. You didn't hear so much as your body recognized it. My teeth buzzed faintly. My chest tightened as if my ribs were a tuning fork. A rhythm beneath hearing. The kind of vibration you feel standing too close to heavy machinery. Keen, my comms man, touched his throat as if checking if his voice still worked. He whispered, "Sir, you feel that?" I nodded once. Rourke lifted one finger, warning us into silence, then pointed down the corridor. 3, first bodies. Two men lay near a half-open blast door. They were security, range personnel. Their uniforms were intact, weapons still in slings. No blood, no obvious injury. But their faces, their eyes were wide, lids stretched, pupils fixed in a way that made my stomach turn. Their mouths were open, not in a scream, more like someone had pulled the expression out of them and left the muscles frozen. Dr. Sato knelt beside one and ran a handheld scanner over his neck and chest. "No trauma," she said. Harlan looked at the man's ears. I followed his gaze and saw a thin line of dried fluid at the ear canal. Not much, like a nosebleed, but from the wrong place. Harlan's voice was tight. Capillary rupture. From pressure? From sound? From what? Rourke did not answer. He only said, "Past this door, the rules change. You do not talk about the sound. You do not hum. You do not whistle. You do not repeat anything you think you hear." My skin tightened across my shoulders. The blast door led into a newly cut tunnel. The edges of the passage showed raw rock and fresh bolt anchors. Mining dust still clung to the surface. Whatever was below had not been meant to be accessed often, or ever, for the motif, the thrum. As we moved deeper, the vibration changed. Not stronger, more organized. It became a patterned thrum in pulses, like a code. It didn't come from one direction. It seemed to arrive from the walls, from the floor, from inside your skull. I focused on the sound of our own movement, boots on concrete, gears shifting, breathing through filters. But the thrum always sat beneath it, like a second heartbeat. We reached a junction where the tunnel widened into an antechamber. There were instrument carts, cable spools, portable lights. Someone had been working here in a hurry. A whiteboard leaned against a crate, written across it in thick marker. Infrasound coupling. Do not match frequency. Do not speak in rhythm. Do not count out loud. Under that, a line that looked like it had been written by a shaking hand. It makes you help it. Sato took a photograph for record. Then she hesitated, staring at the final sentence too long. I said her name. She blinked hard and looked away, like she'd been caught doing something wrong. We continued. The tunnel ended at a vertical shaft reinforced with steel ribs. The wall beside it was stamped with an old identifier, partly ground away, but still visible if you knew how to look. S4. That name is a rumor people argue about in bars and forums. Out here it was just a label on concrete. We rappelled down. The air became colder and thicker, not from humidity but from something else. Fine particulate in suspension. My headlamp beam caught tiny floating motes like dust, but they drifted in patterns that didn't match airflow. Harlan swept the sampler through the beam. His handheld screen flickered. He swallowed. "It's not dust." He didn't explain further. He didn't need to. The way he said it meant. It doesn't behave like dust should. 5, the vault. At the bottom, we entered a chamber that did not look like anything built by standard military contractors. The walls were lined with layered materials. Concrete, then metal mesh, then another pour, then a composite panel that looked like ceramic. All of it pocked and scorched in places, repaired and re-repaired. In the center was something like a hatch, an oval aperture sealed with a thick collar and multiple locking rings. Around it were sensors, fiber optic loops, accelerometers, pressure transducers, acoustic dampers the size of barrels. And near the far wall, a line of body bags. 6. A 7th bag lay open. Inside, a technician with his face turned slightly to the side, like he'd been trying not to look at something even as he died. His eyes were closed. Someone had taped gauze over both ears, then wrapped his head in layers of cloth and plastic, like they were trying to keep something out, or keep something in. The thrum beneath hearing was stronger here. It crawled through the soles of my boots and into my shins. It made my stomach feel hollow, like vertigo without movement. Rourke spoke for the first time in minutes. "This is the interface point. The asset is below. There's been a breach event, microfracture propagation from the lower structure into our containment shell." He said, "Asset," like it was equipment. Sato's voice was clipped. "What is it?" Rourke stared at the hatch. "A recovered system. Not extraterrestrial. Not magical. A buried human project. He paused. Older than you think. 6. What was buried? I'll tell you what they briefed us later. What they admitted after people started dying. In the late Cold War, a compartmented program had attempted something that sounds like science fiction until you understand how much money and desperation can bend reality. They had discovered, under the desert rock, a structure that did not match geology. A deep cavity with walls fused smooth, like stone melted and resolidified. Inside, they found an apparatus, an engineered architecture of dense materials and resonant cavities designed to do one thing: generate structured infrasound and electromagnetic modulation at low frequencies that could couple to human neural activity. Not mind control in the cartoon sense. Not obey commands. More like this: if you can predict how a brain synchronizes, how it uses oscillations to bind sensory input into a coherent reality, then you can interfere with that synchronization. You can induce fear, disorientation, auditory hallucination, compulsion. The program's internal notes called it a cognitive field device. Later, the technicians called it by a simpler name, the choir, because it was always humming. And because people started hearing things that weren't there. And because once you heard it long enough, you started to respond. Not by choice, by reflex. A mirror neuron infection of the mind. They buried it under layers of containment and built a facility over it, trying to study it like a bomb you couldn't disarm. But bombs don't learn. This thing did. 7. Contact. We didn't open the hatch immediately. We set perimeter, deployed sensors, let the technical element run diagnostics. Keen set up a portable relay for comms back up the shaft. Static filled my headset, not normal radio hash. It came in pulses that matched the thrum in the floor. Keen frowned, adjusted dials, swapped frequencies. Sir, he said, it's like the interference is following us. Rourke answered without looking at him. It is... My throat went dry behind the mask. Harlan moved closer to the hatch and placed a vibration sensor on the collar. The readout spiked. He froze. Sato whispered, "What?" Harlan's voice came out thin. "It's responding." "Responding to what?" Harlan looked at me, then at the others, then back at the hatch like he didn't want to say it aloud. To us. The thrum shifted. For the first time, I felt it not as a background vibration, but as something directional, like pressure pushing against my chest from a hatch. The lights above us flickered. A faint, barely audible sound rode on top of the infrasound, a high harmonic that shouldn't have been there. It made the hairs on my arms lift. In my headset, beneath the static, I thought I heard a voice. Not words. A cadence. A shape. A rhythm that matched the way my own mind wanted complete patterns. I clenched my jaw hard enough to ache. I remembered the card. Do not describe the sound. So I won't. But understand this. It wasn't trying to. Speak English. It was trying to make my brain do the work for it. 8. Psychological drift. Minutes passed. Or maybe longer. Time in that chamber felt elastic. The thrum rose and fell. Each rise made my thoughts slightly less linear, like my mind was sliding on wet stone. Sato's hands trembled as she checked her monitor. Keen started tapping his fingers on his rifle without realizing it. A simple rhythm. 1-2, 1-2. Rourke snapped. Stop. Keen jerked, startled, like waking up. He stared at his own hand with confusion, then forced it still. Harlan was breathing too fast. I grabbed his shoulder. Slow it down. He nodded, tried, failed. His eyes were fixed on the hatch like it was a mouth. Then he whispered, almost reverent, "It's beautiful." That word hit me like a punch. Beautiful is not what you say in a kill room. Beautiful is not what you say in a vault full of dead technicians. Sato turned her head slowly toward him. Her voice was distant. "Do you hear the chorus?" I felt my heartbeat slam once. Rourke's face hardened. Mask sealed. Eyes on your partner. If anyone starts repeating patterns, you restrain them. If anyone removes their mask. He stopped. He didn't finish the sentence. Because he didn't have to. We all understood the unspoken rule down there. If the mind goes, the body becomes a tool. 9. Breach. The breach wasn't a dramatic explosion. It was a soundless failure, like a crack in ice spreading under your feet before you fall through. A sharp ping ran through the chamber, metal under stress releasing. One of the hatch locking rings rotated a fraction of an inch. No one touched it. Sato's monitor beeped. Pressure differential, she said. Harlan stepped back. That shouldn't. Another ring moved. Slowly, methodically, like fingers undoing a lid. Rourke shouted into his mic. Control, this is Vault Team. We have mechanical actuation on collar rings. Repeat mechanical actuation. Static swallowed his words. The static wasn't random. It pulsed. It matched the thrum. Keen tried to boost transmission power. His relay popped and died, sparks spitting from the casing. Our connection to the surface went silent in one breath. We were alone, and the hatch kept opening. 10 first death, Keen. Keen stepped forward, not as a tactical move, but like someone walking toward music. Mason, he said softly, it wants. I grabbed his harness and yanked him back. His head snapped toward me, eyes wide with sudden anger, real anger, like I had interrupted something intimate. He raised his rifle, not at the hatch, at me. For a split second, my brain refused to accept what I was seeing. My comms man, my teammate, weapon coming up, his mouth opened, and in that moment I saw his tongue moving, shaping a rhythm, a pattern. I slammed him into the wall. The impact rattled my teeth. He fought like a man drowning, wild and strong. His hands clawed at his mask. Keen, I said, look at me. Stay with me. His fingers found the seal. He tore the respirator free. He inhaled, deep. His eyes rolled slightly upward. A thin line of blood appeared at his nostrils, then more, running down in a sudden warm stream. His ears began to bleed. Not a trickle, a slow, steady pour, dark against his skin. He smiled. Then his body stiffened. He convulsed once, hard enough to slam the back of his skull against the concrete. The sound of bone on stone was wet and final. His legs kicked twice, then stopped. I held him as his weight went dead in my arms, and the thrum on the floor seemed to settle, satisfied, like a machine completing a cycle. Sato made a choked noise behind her mask. Harlan whispered again, voice shaking. It's synchronizing. Rourke's eyes were fixed on the hatch collar. He said, it's using to open it. 11. The creatures, not supernatural. You want monsters. Everyone does. It makes it easier. What came next wasn't a ghost. It wasn't a horn thing. When the hatch finally opened enough to expose the cavity below, a cold breath of air rolled out. Air that smelled like wet metal and old insulation, like a sealed electronics vault. My headlamp beam cut into the opening. Inside, a shaft descending into darkness lined with composite panels and embedded waveguides. And moving in that shaft were shapes. Not humanoid, not alien in the classic sense. They looked like engineered organisms, biomechanical hybrids, built for confined spaces, with segmented bodies like deep-sea creatures and jointed limbs that could fold and unfold without sound. Their skin wasn't skin. It was a matte membrane over structural ribs, and under my light it reflected like carbon fiber dusted with oil. Their heads, if you can call them heads, were not faces. They were sensor clusters, pits and slits and smooth domes arranged to maximize signal reception. They moved in coordinated bursts, not random scuttling. Like drones. Like a team. One climbed up to the lip of the hatch and paused. It didn't lunge. It listened. The thrum changed again, and the creature's body vibrated with it, like it was tuned to the same frequency. Sato whispered, those aren't animals. Harlan's voice was barely audible. They're actuators. Tools. Living tools. The choir's hands. The creature reached one limb out, slow and deliberate, and touched the hatch collar. A locking mechanism inside clicked. Another ring rotated. It was not trying to escape by force. It was trying to unbuild containment, step by step, using the right motion at the right resonance. Intelligent, coordinated, and anatomically wrong in a way that made my stomach fold on itself. Because nothing in nature evolves like that by accident. 12. The hallucinations begin. The chamber lights flicker harder. My headlamp beam jittered as my hand shook. In the corner of my vision, the concrete wall seemed to breathe. Not literally. An optical distortion, like heat shimmer, but colder. I heard my own name in my headset. Mason. Clear. A voice like my father's. He's been dead for 15 years. My jaw clenched until it hurt. I forced myself to focus on physical reality. Weight of rifle, pressure sling, smell of ozone, cold sweat under armor. The voice came again. Mason, it's safe. Rourke snapped. Do not respond. Sato's breathing hitched. She turned her head slowly toward the open body bag by the wall, as if she'd heard something from it. Dr. Sato, I said sharply. Her eyes met mine through the faceplate. For a second I saw the fear. Then something else slid over it. Calm, hollow acceptance. She took one step toward the hatch. I moved to intercept. Rourke grabbed her arm first. Sato jerked free with surprising strength. You don't understand, she said. It's not hostile. It's optimizing. Rourke's voice rose raw. It killed 7 people. Sato's head tilted slightly, like listening to a choir no one else could hear. It didn't kill them, she said. Their brains failed to keep up. Those words were not hers. They were too cold, too technical. Harlan backed away, shaking. It's in our language centers. One of the creatures climbed fully into the chamber. Then a second, then 3 more, moving along the walls and floor with the silent speed of something designed to be efficient. They didn't attack. They spread. They positioned themselves at specific points, near sensors, near cables, near structural seams. They were doing work. 13 to fight. We didn't open fire immediately. That pause will haunt me forever, because in that moment we still thought we were humans dealing with a contained artifact. We were not. We were exposed to a system that could influence cognition through low-frequency coupling, and the organisms in front of us were not random threats. They were maintenance units. They move with purpose, and purpose is what terror recognizes. One creature extended a limb towards Sato, not to strike, to touch. Sato leaned toward it like a sleepwalker. Rourke drew his sidearm and fired. The first round hit the creature's sensor cluster. It didn't explode. It didn't bleed. It shuddered, then latched the floor with hooked limbs like a spider anchoring itself. The second round hit its torso. A puff of gray particulate sprayed out, fine, shimmering dust that hung in the air instead of falling. My throat tightened. Harlan shouted, "Don't breathe that!" Too late. Even with masks, that dust clung to gear, to gloves, to fabric. It moved in subtle curls, attracted to surfaces like it carried a charge. The creature released a vibration. Felt, not heard. My vision blurred. Rourke fired again. Another creature moved between him and the first, shielding it. Coordination. I opened fire, control bursts, aiming for joints. Rounds punched into the matte bodies and produced more of that gray dust. The chamber filled with it like smoke made of metallic pollen. The thrum intensified. It climbed into my skull, pushing my thoughts toward fragmentation. Keen's dead body lay against the wall, eyes open now, staring at nothing. And I could have sworn his lips moved, shaping that same rhythm. Sato screamed, not loud, but inside her mask a muffled animal sound, and tore free of Rourke's grip. She ran to the hatch. I chased, boots slipping slightly on dust-coated concrete. I grabbed her harness. She twisted, and her elbows slammed into my chest. Pain flared. She reached into her vest and pulled a small cutter, one of the tech tools. She turned it toward her own neck seal. "No," I said, voice cracking. Her eyes were wet. "It hurts," she whispered. "It can make it stop." And then she cut her respirator seal. Air rushed in. She inhaled deeply. Her body went rigid. Blood poured from her nose, from her ears, faster than Keen's. It ran down her chin, staining the front of her suit. She made one choking sound, then fell backward. I caught her too late. Her weight hit my arms like a sack. Behind me, Rourke shouted orders into dead comms. Harlan was on his knees, hands pressed his helmet, rocking. The creatures moved faster now. Two clung to the hatch collar and rotated another ring with synchronized limb motion, like multiple hands turning a single wheel. The hatch opened wider. The shaft below exhaled a colder breath, and something larger shifted in the darkness beneath, scraping against composite walls. Not supernatural, not impossible, just engineered at a scale we should never have allowed underground. 14. Loss of self. At this point, the report becomes harder to keep linear. My memory fractures here, and I have to reconstruct it from helmet cam and the fragmentary notes I wrote after. But I remember the sensations, the dust clinging to my gloves like static-charged ash, the vibration making my teeth ache, the way the chamber's edges began to pulse in my vision, as if my brain couldn't decide what was solid. I remember hearing voices in the thrum, voices of teammates long dead. I remember tasting copper even through the mask like blood, though I wasn't bleeding yet. I remember Rourke shouted my name, and for a moment his voice split into two tones, one real, one carried on the vibration. The carried one sounded kinder, softer, like someone offering rest. I understood then what "it makes you help" it meant. It didn't need to force open the vault. It needed human hands to fail at the right moments. It needed hesitation, curiosity, mercy. It needed us to become predictable. 15. The climax. The vault opens. The final locking ring rotated. The hatch collar released with a dull, heavy clunk that vibrated through my bones. The shaft below was open. Cold air rolled out in a steady stream now, carrying that metallic wet smell and more particulate. The creature stopped moving for 1 second, as if awaiting instruction. Then the larger shape rose. It wasn't a single creature, like a movie, monster. It was a cluster, a modular assemblage of segments and limbs that locked together, forming something like a mobile framework. Multiple sensor heads, multiple joint arrays, all moving in coordinated patterns. A system, a body made of bodies. It climbed with slow certainty, using the shaft walls like ladder rungs. As it reached the hatch lip, it paused and turned its sensor array toward us. Not eyes, but attention. The thrum shifted into a pulse that hit my chest like a physical blow. Harlan screamed and ripped off his mask. He inhaled, eyes wide with desperate relief, like breathing raw air with salvation. Then blood erupted from his nose and mouth. He collapsed, convulsing, fingers clawing at the floor. The dust around him swirled, attracted to moisture, coating his face like gray frost. Rourke fired his pistol until it clicked empty. The rounds did almost nothing. I raised my rifle and fired into joint clusters, into sensor heads, into the seams between segments. More dust, more vibration. The larger assembly moved closer, not rushing, approaching like a technician walking toward a machine that needs adjustment. It extended a limb toward Rourke, and for a split second Rourke stopped fighting. He lowered his weapon slightly. His eyes softened. He whispered, "It's beautiful." The same word Harlan had used. The same infection. I lunged and slammed into Rourke, knocking him sideways. The limb struck the space he'd been standing in and hit the wall. Concrete cracked outward in a spider pattern. The limb didn't have claws. It had a tool end, a hardened, shaped surface designed to transmit vibration precisely. It struck again and the crack widened. The wall wasn't just breaking from force. It was being fatigued by resonance, like a singer shattering glass. But this was concrete and steel. Rourke staggered up, dazed. He looked at me like I'd betrayed him. "Mason," he said, voice calm, "stop resisting. You're making it worse." I saw then that his eyes were bleeding slightly at the corners. He hadn't removed his mask. The thrum was doing it anyway. A sudden sharp tremor ran through the chamber. Above us, somewhere in the shaft, something collapsed. Dust rained from the ceiling. The creatures moved to the chamber's instrument carts and began cutting cables with precise limb motions. They weren't escaping. They were disabling our ability to measure them, to understand them, to record. They were erasing our eyes and ears. I realized what they were doing too late. If no one could measure the signal, no one could tune a countersignal. And if no one could record what happened, there would be no evidence. Only rumors. Only disbelief. Only the choir, humming quietly under the desert, waiting for the next set of hands. 16. Escape. I grabbed Rourke's harness and dragged him toward the rappel shaft. He fought me, weakly, like a man waking from anesthesia and not understanding why he's being pulled. The thrum surged, and I almost let go. In my headset, a voice, my mother's, whispered, "Come home." Tears burned my eyes, sudden and hot, and I hated myself for the relief that voice offered. I bit the inside of my cheek hard enough to taste blood. Pain anchored me. I kept moving. Behind us, the larger assembly climbed fully into the chamber. It did not chase in a sprint. It followed at a constant pace. Certain we would fail on our own. Keen's body shifted slightly as we passed. I swear it did. Helmet cam later shows his body did not move, but I felt it, and that feeling is important because it tells you what the choir does. It makes you doubt your senses until you prefer its signal to your own reality. We reached the shaft. I clipped my ascender and shoved Rourke onto the line. "Up," I ordered. He looked down into the chamber like he was reluctant to leave a warm room. Then the infrasound pulse hit again, and he smiled faintly. "It's calling," he murmured. A creature reached the shaft base and latched onto the line. Not to climb, to vibrate it. The rope hummed in my hands. The vibration traveled up my arms like an electric current. My vision narrowed. I felt my thoughts begin to slide into rhythm, like my brain wanted to match the pulse and stop struggling. I forced my hands to move anyway, mechanical, trained. Climb, clip, push, climb. Above, the shaft lights flickered. Halfway up, I heard a snap behind me. I looked down. Rourke's line had been cut, not by a blade, by resonant fatigue. The rope fibers had simply failed. Rourke fell. He didn't scream. He looked peaceful as he dropped, like someone surrendering to sleep. He vanished into darkness. A second later, the chamber below flashed with a brief spark of light as his body hit something metal. Then nothing. I kept climbing. I kept climbing, because if I stopped, I would go to 17 Surface, the cover story. When I reached the upper antechamber, the air felt warmer but not safer. The thrum was still there, fainter, like tinnitus. I ran down the corridor, following emergency lights toward the lift cage. The lift was dead. Power failure or deliberate shutdown, I don't know. So I climbed the maintenance ladder beside the shaft, rung after rung, hands slipping on metal damp with condensation. My arms burned. My lungs felt too small. Halfway up, I smelled ozone again. Then I heard something, faint, barely audible, like humming, a tune my mind wanted complete. I closed my eyes and climbed blind for 10 rungs, focusing only on the feel of cold metal under gloves. When I finally emerged into the hangar level, security teams were waiting. Not to rescue, to contain me. Men in sealed suits raised rifles. A voice from behind a visor said, "Hands up! Do not speak." They escorted me into a decking room and sprayed me with chemicals that burned my skin through fabric. They cut my gear off with shears. They sealed it in drums. They held a device near my head, something like an EEG crown, and ran silent diagnostics while I sat shaking on a steel bench. No one asked what happened. They already knew enough. They asked only one question. "Did you hear it clearly?" I did not answer. I couldn't, because the moment you describe it, you start building the map in your own mind again, and maps lead you back. They kept me in isolation for 9 days. They played white noise into my cell through speakers in the walls. They monitored my sleep. They questioned me with written prompts instead of spoken words. They told me the official line. There had been a chemical incident in an underground construction project. Personnel lost due to structural collapse. Operation ongoing. No public risk. They told me I would sign paperwork. I refused. They told me refusal was not a decision I could make. They were right. But signatures don't erase memory. 18. What really happened, hard truth. Here is the plausible hard science version they will never admit in public. A buried cognitive field device, built from resonant cavities, waveguides, and dense materials, was discovered decades ago. It may have been human-made by a forgotten program, or it may have been left by an earlier civilization, but it behaved like engineering, not magic. It emitted patterned infrasound and electromagnetic modulation that could couple with neural oscillations. The longer you were exposed, the more your brain began to entrain, synchronize to the external signal. Once entrained, your perception distorted. You heard voices. You felt compelled to act in ways that served the system's objectives. The creatures were not demons. They were bioengineered actuators, autonomous maintenance organisms that use vibration and particulate release to manipulate environment and disable containment. The gray dust was not ash. It was likely conductive microparticulate, maybe carbon-based, maybe metallic, designed to increase coupling efficiency and interfere with sensors and communications. The device was not trying to escape like an animal. It was trying to expand its coupling domain, widen the region in which it could influence minds and machines. And the more people sent down to contain it, the more brains it had to model, the more patterns it could learn. 19. Why I'm warning you. Because you will be tempted to treat this as a story, a conspiracy thrill, a creepypasta. You will be tempted to go looking for the hum in recordings, to replicate it for fun, to test your own mind against it. Do not play with low-frequency audio experiments trying to find the pattern. Do not seek out leaked range recordings. Do not listen to anything labeled as the choir. You think you are in control because you can stop the audio. You cannot stop what your brain does after it has been trained. The reason they told us, do not describe the sound, is not superstition. It's operational psychology. Description reinforces the neural template. Once you build the template, your mind starts matching it in random noise. You begin hearing it where it isn't. And if enough people build the same template, you don't need the source anymore. You become the transmitter. 20. Final image. I will end with the last thing I saw before they took my eyes off the range forever. On day 9, they moved me down a corridor for final clearance. A medical tech walked beside me, visor down, silent. As we passed an open service bay, I saw a drum being rolled toward a sealed freight elevator. The drum was marked with black stenciled letters. Particulate waste, conductive, handle with insulation. Do not open. A thin line of gray dust had leaked from the lid and smeared along the drum side like a fingerprint. Someone, maybe a worker, maybe a guard, had accidentally dragged a glove across it. The dust clung to the glove in a perfect crescent, and as the drum rolled, that crescent shifted slightly, as if responding to a vibration I couldn't hear. It moved like iron filings around a magnet, like something aligning itself. Then the freight elevator door closed, and in the brief moment before the seam vanished, I saw the inside wall of the elevator. Someone had scratched words into the steel with something sharp, not a warning sign, not an official label, a message carved by a human hand that had been down there and come back wrong. It said, "We brought it a choir." And beneath that, a smaller line, almost delicate. Now it sings in U.S. So here's my final warning to you, direct and plain. If you ever hear a low, steady thrum that feels like it lives inside your teeth, if you ever find yourself counting without knowing why, if you ever catch your fingers tapping a rhythm you didn't choose, stop, leave, break the pattern. Because the thing under the desert does not need to climb out. It only needs you to listen long enough to carry it with you. And once you do, it will not be buried anymore. It will be standing behind your eyes, humming, while you stare at the world and slowly realize the world has started humming back. Exact word count, 2012.